Gary Pageau is the principal of InfoCircle LLC, a marketing communications company founded in 2012. For the last 12 years, InfoCircle has provided marketing services, blogging, marketing research, and event marketing to local and national clients. Their flagship publication is the Dead Pixel Society, a website, podcast, and newsletter for the imaging industry. Let's see what makes Gary so buzzworthy. Welcome to the show, Gary. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I am doing really well. It is a Monday, and I just started reading this book called The Miracle Morning or Morning
Okay.
Miracle. Yeah, one of those two. This guy Hal, and I'm horrible with last names, but this guy Hal, he has sold this book like 2 million times, and it's a morning ritual. And I have a morning ritual, but my wife does not. And so as I'm reading this, I'm listening to it. I run to the gym, work out, and run back. And so I get about an hour and about 15 minutes of listening to a book every morning. And somebody suggested I listen to this book, so I did. And like a lot of stuff I'm doing, but then I'm like, wow, this would be really good for my wife. But for some reason, I think because there was a lot of I was already doing, it made me feel reinvigorated about the fact that
Sure.
I already do those things. And it's like guys like Guy Kawasaki actually followed this same ritual. It's called
hmm
Lifesavers, and Savers is an acronym for the 6 things that you do in the morning. And it's like about a half an hour to an hour, depending on what you do with it, that you do. And it just like sets you up for the day. So it's like, I think it felt like there was some affirmation there that I was there. Anywho, I digress.
Oh no, I'm always interested in those kind of not necessarily life hacks, but behavior modifications, right? So
Right. Right.
I've
No,
just been I just started the Atomic Habits book, so that's another one I'm reading.
love that book.
Yeah.
That's one of those books you are going to have to. So I have it both I have a hard copy, a Kindle, and an audio.
Mhm.
So my
But do
hard
you have
copy,
the app?
I do not have the app. So I'm not, yeah, I got enough apps in my life. So I was like, if you want to give me a resource, like download, you ever done Gino Wickman's EOS?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I have his PDF download in my note taker. So,
Right.
so to do my daily tasks and stuff like that for my EOS. And for those who don't know what that's, Entrepreneur Operating System, Gino
Right.
Wickman is we've had him on the Buzzworthy Marketing Show, and he is the author of Traction. And
hmm
he was so everybody knows what we're talking about. We're all geeking out over
Right.
here
Yeah.
with industry
Yeah.
stuff.
I've seen him speak. You should go check it out if you haven't.
Yes,
If you're
yes. Oh, I'm
familiar with
shoot.
it.
I have him on the podcast. It was amazing. We talked about. He's got a new book that just came out called Shine, and it's about leadership now, and
Mhm.
like internalizing and introspection and mindset in
Mhm.
leadership. And so he's got like 22 factors to it. But it's amazing to listen and talk. He's very passionate about it. But anyway, we digress. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about InfoCircle and
Yep.
the fact that you guys have been around for about 12 years, which is congratulations. Made it
Thank you.
through
Thank you.
the COVID and all that
The
good stuff.
COVID.
Yes. We're about to turn 20 years old next February.
Wow, you're almost old enough to drink.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, it's weird because there's not a lot of business. I talk to business owners every day, and it's rare that I get to talk to people who have been over a decade in this day and age. It's really interesting how
hmm
many more new businesses are around. And it's a huge influx of small
hmm
businesses during COVID. And since then, I think with the Gen Z coming on into the workspace, we're seeing a huge spike in entrepreneurialism. And so I think
Sure.
we're seeing that. And then we have a lot of Gen Xers who are retiring from their corporate grind. And as corporate refugees are trying to find something else to do because now they do have 40 to 50 more years in their life. And they're like, I can't stay retired and do absolutely nothing for another half century.
Right.
So, talk to us a little bit about what made you start. We'll just call it that.
There you
InfoCircle.
go. So it was an act of desperation, really. I'd worked for this organization, a nonprofit in the photo industry, for about 25 years,
Okay.
and that was like the place I was going to die at. I mean, it was that sort of thing. Unfortunately, a bunch of things happened
Uh-huh.
that were out of the organization's control. That just let's put it this way: we went from 90 employees down to 18 when I left, through market decline, through business erosion, bad management,
Oh.
bad strategic planning, all kinds of things. There's a book in there somewhere. But anyway, so so at one point I chose to leave. I was like, I'm done with this.
Hmm.
I'm gonna leave. And it was all very cordial, and I'd been in the industry for 25 years at that point, and I had 1,000 contacts, and all my industry friends were like, you've got all the contacts in the industry. Everybody knows you. You should go out on your own.
Hmm.
And so I started the company to basically start consulting in the industry to kind
Uh-huh.
of leverage my contacts with the intention that eventually I would get, quote unquote, a real job. And it just never actually happened that way. And then over time, one thing I was known for in the industry was doing an industry newsletter. And when the industry association went under, there really wasn't a place for that.
Mm.
So I started my own,
Gotcha.
and which is the Dead Pixel Society. You see it there on the screen. And so the Dead Pixel Society was really my way of offering content in the industry to keep my name out there, right? It was almost
Mm.
a marketing tool. And
Right.
I just basically started it as sort of a Facebook page, just to keep my friends in the
That's
industry
awesome.
updated. And then
Right.
I had a good friend in the industry say, well, if you turn this into a newsletter, I'll sponsor it. And I was like, okay,
All right.
that could be a business, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how that started, and that's been an official like thing newsletter for 6 or 7 years, and
Oh.
still maintaining like the consulting side of it, right? I keep them separate but engaged. In other words, if you're a consulting client,
Uh-huh.
you're not, it's separate from your Dead Pixel Society sponsorship, right?
Right.
I do keep them separate because it's just easier that way.
Sure.
I mean, the Dead Pixel Society stuff has now become more of what I'm known for, in the sense
Hmm.
that people ask me who I am, and they'll say I'm the Dead Pixel Society guy. And since then, we've branched out, um, to not only is there the weekly newsletter,
Hmm.
and we added a podcast in 2019, or no, it was early 2020. It was COVID, because
Hmm.
I was like everyone else who was sort of in this zone of, in the world of kind of the solopreneur or whatever.
Hmm.
I freaked out. I'm like, all my clients are going to dry up, right?
Right.
So I just figured I have to double down. I'm going to do twice as much content,
There you
and I
go.
and I didn't even want to do a podcast. That's the funny thing, because when I was with PMA, the association,
Yeah.
we were in podcasting when there were still iPods. I
Right.
mean, we were doing a podcast back then, so I
Or you
knew
got
how
to have a
much work it
studio.
was. Yeah, and I mean, and I did not want to actually, because I knew how much work it was. I never wanted to do one.
Right.
And then I was like, well, I got to just suck it up and do it. So I did an interview format, and you've been on
Yeah.
actually as one of my guests back in March of 2022, I believe it was.
Yes, I'm a
And
Dead Pixel Society alumni.
there you go. Well, that's been sort of the secret sauce. You kind of mentioned that, because it's not really a newsletter, it's not really a podcast. It's
Right.
more of a community, and that's the way I structure it, in the
Mm.
sense that I also do some events. I partner with different organizations and do basically content for my segment of the industry, which is basically people who print pictures, right?
Okay.
That's a very uh,
Simplified version, yes.
simplified version of that,
Yes.
but because it's far more complex than that. But it's
100%.
basically people who serve photographers is my audience,
There you go.
and so it is very clubby. It's been around for a long time,
Uh-huh.
and it's very they had nowhere else to go in some ways, right? Because when the association collapsed, they were kind of looking for a home, and I'm trying to become that
Mm.
home. So I've done different things where I've had meetups at tech conferences, and I've had
Nice.
different things like that, just to get people together.
Mm,
I've done webinars. I did a one last month, just basically to do a hot topic, just to get in front
sure.
of people.
Hmm.
And so that's sort of the length and breadth of the things we do.
I
So
love that. That's awesome. And so the Dead Pixel Society, you're saying that this is a newsletter, a podcast that and content and events wrapped
mhm,
around the imaging industry, right? And I'm a recovering or a recovered, I should say, photographer. I have
sure.
finally gone on an international trip without my camera. I was like, my wife's like, "You're not bringing your camera." It's like, actually, there are more megapixels in my phone than there are in
Right.
my Sony. And I'm like, she's like, "Oh," I
Well,
said, and now
I
I have
have
all
some
the
people
things
you could
that are
buy
in
a camera from that would be better, but no. Well, that's the thing is, you
there.
have I take a very holistic view of this, right?
Right?
In the sense that camera phones are fine; they're great. I mean, more people taking pictures is great. So,
Yeah.
it is. This is actually the um, uh, golden age of camera hardware,
Oh,
actually,
100%.
because you've got smartphones, clear, which are excellent. Then
Yep.
you've got mirrorless cameras, which are crazy good, right?
Yep.
I actually tell you how satisfied I was with smartphones. I just bought my first mirrorless camera in about 10 years because I was so happy with what I could do with my iPhone, but I
Okay.
wanted to do more stuff with that. And plus, you've got the
I'm
action
actually being
cam.
recorded on one of those right now. I'm looking down the
There,
barrel of a DSLR.
there you go. And then you have drones. You've got action
Oh,
cameras.
yes.
You've got
Yes.
all these other ways that if you want to be a content creator, um, you've got more choices than ever. And
You
so
just gave me
if
an
you're looking at
idea.
a sliver of, yeah, I'm not buying that Sony, digital with the
Yeah,
3x zoom anymore,
right.
that's fine.
Yeah,
But
yeah. No, yeah. I think the all-in-one cameras um have gone to the wayside. Like, and I even the last small camera was a Nikon. I was a Nikon kid in my film
yeah,
in the age of film. There's some people are listening to this that have never actually handled negatives or actual camera film, which I think is amazing. The but when I was making, I was a Nikon kid, and then even when I went to digital, my first DSLR was Nikon. And it
sure,
wasn't until I had my creative agency and all of our cameras are Sony's.
right.
And I was looking at, and somebody had stolen my Nikon and I didn't replace it for a long time because I was busy doing other things. And photography wasn't a thing anymore for me. And, and when I went to replace my FS100, which is a big box, right? It's
Sure,
like one of the original HD SIM card,
yeah.
cameras for Sony. And I'm like, I don't want that big box anymore. I just want, okay, do they have? And I saw these people like they're doing videos holding what looks like a DSLR, and I'm like, that's actually a DSLR. They're just doing video on a camera, and I'm like, that is amazing. So I actually became a Sony guy over the years. But yes, I think that is amazing. So would you say that the Dead Pixel Society is good for both the professional and maybe even the prosumer?
Only if you're interested in for if like I say you're in the business, right, of serving photographers, right? So
Okay.
prosumer really doesn't, I don't there are tons of photography podcasts out there, right? And tons of people who are in the business of coaching photographers. That's a whole cottage industry right there. People do workshops and that. My people are the people who make the prints, host the websites, have the apps,
Gotcha.
retail stores, camera stores, whatever. So some of those folks actually who are prosumers
Hmm.
go pro, right? They do get into that business. So I mean, and I know I have a lot of just kind of general business content too, because
Hmm.
the issues that those kind of people are wrestling with are not really radically different from almost any other consumer products industry, which is one of the things that they struggle with
Right.
because every business is, as you probably know from your consulting work, every business thinks they have a unique set of problems and a unique set of challenges that no one has ever encountered before, and only they know how the solutions for. When the reality is, There are a lot of the same problems along a lot of the same businesses.
90%, I would say, of business. So I've
Yeah,
done marketing for over 1,200 businesses in the last 19 years. And and this is across all industries. There's very few industries I have not worked with. So from B2C, e-commerce, B2D, or D2C, I should say, digital to consumer, and B2B, which is where we now play, and exclusively. And I'm telling you right now, 80 to 90% of the business issues are the same across the board when you talk about a product company versus a service company. Okay. So like 80% of all the services businesses out there have the same, about 80% of the same problems. And then 80% of the problems that product-based businesses are exactly the same as there. It's that 10 to 20% that makes them different between industries. And it's just the idiosyncrasies of their industry, right? Supply chains and stuff like that are different in different industries in the B2C. Legislation can be the differentiator in services, right? And now in your service-based business, are you a B2C service-based? Those are different than, because your clients are different than your B2Bs. We're all serving people, but still your mindset as a consumer versus a mindset as a business owner, or spending the business's money, sometimes not your own. Those are different ways of making purchases, right? And so those idiosyncrasies are there. So yes, I think that anybody who has a business podcast could easily say, you know what, 80% of the stuff we're going to talk about, if I have an industry podcast, you're going to get something out of it, right? And if photography is something that you enjoy, why not, right? You get to learn a little bit about photography and the industry and all that stuff, because there's so many like hobby things you can do if you do like photography, like getting prints and stuff like that. There's a lot of those things.
I mean, that's the thing. People are like, well, no one ever prints anymore. Well, actually they do, and they print a lot. It's just they're printing differently because, and actually it's funny you mentioned film. Film has actually come back. It's actually a hot commodity right now.
I bet.
If you got old film cameras in your closet,
producing it, but
get those things refurbed and you can resell them for hundreds. People are buying old film cameras like you won't believe. It's all the Gen Zs who, who are just in love with that tactile. They have LPs, they have cassettes, they do all that stuff. And now they're all into film, which is just like the people who have been in the industry who've made the transition to digital are just scratching their heads because they don't see the reason to go back, right? Well, I know a lot of pro photographers who are like, really? You're going to limit yourself to 36 exposures on this thing when, So anyway, but it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a nostalgic thing, though. Like, it's funny, it's borrowed nostalgia, right? Like these are the same kids who wear like Metallica shirts, have never been to a Metallica concert, and some of them like you see a Poison shirt, right? And you're like, so what's your favorite Poison song? They don't know. It just looks cool because us kids in the 80s, we had good taste. It's okay, but I think that you do have things you can do. So when I was making the transition, there was a long time where I was shooting on film, and then I'd take the film and then have my digital digitizer digitize it. So it had a little reader that you just put the negatives in, and you get in there, and then you get to do whatever you want with it. But I do agree, like putting a stick in and knowing that I have 1,800 frames at 24 megapixels or whatever it is that I've got going on. Yeah, it's pretty nice. And to be able to go between.
Well, the funny thing is, you just touched on an interesting point, because the funny thing is, like the New York Times has an article on this where people are processing the film and then they're having it digitized immediately. Then it's put in a gallery and they never pick up the negatives. And
oh, no.
Yeah, they don't even know they exist. They just don't even know. It's just they just want the online gallery of their poorly exposed, half blurry, pictures. And so it's like, okay, so the film processor like, well, come pick up your negs or else I'm gonna have to throw them away. It's just crazy. It's just crazy.
I was the kid that sat there sitting at the door waiting for them to open up for the day that mine was ready to go. Only to find there were only 2 frames out of the whole roll.
Well, exactly. And that's what, again, those are my people too, the people who process the film, and I mean, again, the people who are getting into film as Gen Z do not understand how fragile that ecosystem is because the film processing equipment was made 10, 15 years ago. No one's making any new stuff.
Mm-mm.
And, getting chemicals is hard. Getting
Mm-hmm.
film is very difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
when you were shooting film as a hobbyist, 15 years ago, you were probably paying $7-8 a roll. You can pay anywhere from 25 to $30 a roll plus processing on top of that.
Jeez.
So
And that's probably not even for
it's
medium format. That's probably just
no,
for
no, just
35
35. Yep.
millimeter.
Yep. So
That's
it's a whole
amazing.
different thing. But
Yes. Well,
anyway,
I think
it is interesting because the market's had to adapt
uh-huh.
to, here's another example of that. One of the hottest products right now are instant cameras,
Mm-hmm.
right? The
Yeah.
Fuji Instax, Polaroid,
Yeah. They
different
finally
people
came
have
back.
their versions that are similar, but basically it's Fuji Instax and Polaroid
Right.
are the two. And those are hot. I mean,
Huge. Because you're doing
it
both. You can both have the digital and you get the instant.
some
Yeah.
do, not all of them, but some capture a digital image and then write it onto the print. Yep, they do
Yeah.
that.
That's amazing. So if um I want to wrap up with a couple questions about
Sure,
building a community, because you've built this amazing community, right? And
sure.
it's kind of from the ashes rose this phoenix called the Dead Pixel Society, right?
That is what
And
happened. Yeah.
in an industry. So if somebody is experiencing something similar, maybe they're in a industry where the organizations never have evolved, like,
Right.
so there was never something cool or progressively innovative, right? And all that stuff. What
Sure.
advice, knowing what you know now, that's a
Right.
better question. Knowing what you know now, what would have you told yourself back when you first started the Dead Pixels Society?
Well, I think the thing number one is understand what it is you're doing. I didn't really start it with the intention of it becoming like its own entity, right? Its own business. It was more of a, like I said earlier, promotional tool for the consulting thing.
Right.
And then what happened is it took on, and I think what I would have done is I would have doubled down a lot earlier on events
Mm,
and things. I would have just committed earlier, but
mm,
just and also be patient. I mean, it's sort of one of those things where I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth
mhm,
because it did take a long time to grow to the point where the sponsorship revenue and the other opportunities that were coming up really started to make it self sufficient. But I think I would have done better if I really would have just like put the stake in the ground saying, we are the preeminent community for people in the photo personalization market, right? That's kind of our, my internal motto, and just gone whole hog into that instead of saying, like, here's my newsletter, please subscribe, whatever. You know what I mean? I was kind of almost, I would say I was almost embarrassed, but I was very like, it was a soft sell, not a hard sell.
mm,
And I think that is probably the advice I would give somebody. If you've identified a market where there's already an existing community of people who have common issues, right? Common problems, common discussion points, whatever that commonality is,
mhm,
just go for it with the intention that it's going to be ongoing and it's
mhm.
going to grow, because that's what people, when it comes to developing like a sponsorship base and things like that, that's what they want to see, right? They want to see, are you going to stick with this? Is this a one-off? That sort of thing.